Okay, put me under lie detection and emotion reads. I would like an opportunity to stick up for my Patreon supporters, Brad, Magnus, and Virginia. I have very high emotional intelligence. The last time it was measured, it was 10,000. 10,000. And from what I understand, it is much higher than that right now, because it appears I may be transitioning to deity. Based on my genius emotional intelligence, I'm going to give you a scenario of if we allowed our enemy to bring this to court, how I, as their defense attorney, would question them and how I believe they would answer me if they weren't suffering PTSD. You might say, well, this doesn't prove their innocence or guilt. Yeah, that's true, and you may be wrong in how you think they would answer. That is correct. However, I've had extensive conversations with them during our Friday night hangouts, and I've had a chance to get to know them. And they've also discussed with me some of the emotions and some of the stuff they went through when they went to Frisco and Arlington and these places. And based on the conversations that I've had with them, I'm going to tell you how I think they would have answered me if they were not suffering PTSD, okay? When I questioned them as their defense attorney in an imaginary trial against that abominable Jesuit lawyer. From what I understand, the Jesuits haven't gone under lie detection yet. And if they did, it would probably be an inaccurate lie detection anyway. So like I said, but you say, why are you doing this? Because I want the world to know the truth as I perceive it. Okay? So let's go ahead with my dramatic performance. Pretend like I am a defense attorney and I guess I ought to read the charges first. Yeah. From that garbage letter. Garbage letter. All right. Boy, they're making me cough. To whom it may concern. My name is F.R. Malthus. I'm going to have to get my glasses again. Yeah. Very small print, and my computer is not going to make this larger. Yeah. Maybe I can put this up a little bit higher, huh? Yeah. Okay. Okay. My name is F.R. Malthus Bain, attorney at law to the Order of the Jesuits N.A. Incorporated. This press statement functions as a complete refutation of the claims of one Mrs. Gail Schuler, who goes by the moniker the Antichrist. Mrs. Schuler and her terrorist organization, the Church of Gail, is subject to a lawsuit in Texas for the murder of dozens of Indian nationals who are permanent residents of the United States of America. The Indian community of Frisco, Texas, have established a political action committee PAC named Frisco Indians Against White Supremacy, FIAWS. This PAC aims to bring down the Church of Gail and cause it to pay for its heinous crimes against the Indian community. You know, I'm going to go get something. Hold on. Yeah. Heinous crimes against the Indian community. The Church of Gail, a known racial supremacist organization, has perpetrated several acts of genocide against the Indian people over its history, the most recent of which was the pogrom of Indians at a so-called compassion center in Frisco. This center was nothing more than a concentration camp, or to use Mrs. Schuler's own words, a death camp, aimed at the murder of Indians. They lured Indians in with the promise of unspeakable sex acts to comfort them for losing government food benefits. After entering, said Indians were subjected to torture using drugs and violence. The Church of Gail caused the Indians to ejaculate over and over in an attempt to gather their semen for a heretofore unknown reason. This statement will expose exactly what the Church of Gail sought to do. Mrs. Schuler is a self-styled antichrist whose goal is to malign Christianity and set up a one-world government under her rule. Per Church of Gail documents, it has been discovered that Mrs. Schuler believes that she is allied with Satan and will eventually overthrow God himself and become a goddess. In her front to the public, she claims that she is the chosen of Jesus Christ and that her various and multitudinous misfortunes are the result of the Jesuit order and other groups aligned with and allied to Satan. Let me show you some pictures here. Take a look at this. This is an actual black and white photograph. Hitler shaking hands with some Roman Catholic cardinals here. Yeah. Take a look at that. Hitler was a devout Roman Catholic. He has claimed to us that he was not even aware of the concentration camps. Yeah, they pulled some dirty tricks on him. Let's continue with this. What else do we have here? Yep. Here are some more pictures. Right here. You've got nuns marching together with Croatian Nazi legionnaires. They were called the Ustashi. This was World War II. Okay? These are actual photographs of Roman Catholics involved in concentration camps and torture. This is from World War II. Here's some of what they did. These are Roman Catholics. You might say, well, this is what they did in World War II. And they made Hitler their scapegoat. Okay, I'm not saying Hitler was completely innocent. Here's more of what they did in World War II. These were Roman Catholic soldiers. Right here. Ustashi carrying the head of a Serbian Orthodox priest. At Dubrovnik, Dalmatia, fascist soldiers, the Ustashi were right there. That's a Franciscan monk. This is taken from Jack Chick's smokescreens. Yeah, Jack Chick found out about this because a Jesuit who had barely escaped with his life from the Jesuit order, named Alberto Rivera, exposed this. They almost succeeded in killing him. They tortured him, man. Yeah. They're even claiming that Alberto Rivera was not really a Jesuit priest. Yeah. Yep. But he's the one who said that he escaped. He died in 1998. They murdered him. Yeah, they don't like being exposed. Okay, let me continue. Okay. After, the most recent of which was the pogrom of Indians at a so-called compassion center in Frisco. This center was nothing more than a concentration camp, or to use Mrs. Schuler's own words, a death camp aimed at the murder of Indians. They lured Indians in with the promise of unspeakable sex acts to comfort them for losing government food benefits. After entering, said Indians were subjected to torture using drugs and violence. The Church of Gail caused the Indians to ejaculate over and over in an attempt to gather their semen for a heretofore unknown reason. This statement will expose exactly what the Church of Gail sought to do. Mrs. Schuler is a self-styled antichrist they put that in quotes, whose goal is to malign Christianity and set up a one-world government under her rule. Per Church of Gail documents, it has been discovered that Mrs. Schuler believes that she is allied with Satan and will eventually overthrow God himself and become a goddess. In her front to the public, she claims that she is the chosen of Jesus Christ and that her various and multitudinous misfortunes are the result of the Jesuit order and other groups aligned with and allied to Satan. This is amusing, given the fact that the Jesuit order is a public service-oriented organization whose mission statement is the propagation and defense of the teachings of Jesus Christ worldwide. I would like to state that there are good Roman Catholics out there, okay? There are. And a lot of them would be horrified if they knew what the Jesuits have really done, like the pictures I just showed you. Okay? All right, let's continue. The Jesuit order is a public service-oriented organization whose mission statement is the propagation and defense of the teachings of Jesus Christ worldwide. This Antichrist ironically uses this cover to disguise the terroristic acts of the Church of Gail and to curry favor with average God-fearing and Bible-trusting people. Be not confused. Mrs. Schuler is precisely what she claims to be, an Antichrist. This is true in the sense that she is against everything that our Lord Jesus Christ has ordained to be true and moral in this world. She relishes in violence and death, and she will stop at nothing to gain power and become a goddess. The Frisco Compassion Center incident is no exception. Recently, Mrs. Schuler uploaded video to her YouTube channel attempting to shift blame for a wide variety of events onto others. She claimed that the Frisco Compassion Center was an attempt by robots to engage in a kind of brain surgery on the average person to turn them into willing or unwilling slaves. This, of course, is impossible. There is no league of sentient robots doing this at all. Rather, this clever deflection is a way to distract from the Church of Gail's genocidal aims in Frisco. Indeed, the Frisco Center was covered in Church of Gail markings and advertisements. Because the massacre was uncovered, the Church of Gail has sought fit to divert attention from it and point the finger at its enemies. Mrs. Schuler has also claimed that another compassion center in Arlington, Virginia, was a Jesuit and thin privilege movement effort to brainwash its unsuspecting victims. This cannot be further from the truth. Rather, as the news has correctly reported, the Arlington Center was another death camp of abuse and crime. There, the Church of Gail sought to pretend that the Jesuit order and the thin privilege movement had attempted to brainwash its invitees. When the center's... Oh, my neck is hurting. I have to lean forward to read this thing. When the center's activities were exposed by one of our undercover members, the Church of Gail fabricated a car bombing of the site in a manner reminiscent of the Oklahoma City bombing. One of their agents named Bradley drove his Grand Cherokee into the building filled with fertilizer and detonated the vehicle. Hundreds of former government workers perished in the attack. These workers were furloughed due to the immoderate and uncharitable austerity policy of the current presidential administration. We believe that the driver perished in the bombing. The crimes committed within the center range from sexual abuse of those kidnapped therein to the use of chemicals to drug them to orgiastic rites in support of their satanic beliefs and ultimately murder. These murders were perpetrated by two of their most skilled killers for hire, Magnus the Red and Virginia Opossum. Like I said, I've been dealing with them. This is absolutely not who they are. I have no doubt about this. Magnus is a very intelligent, conscientious person. That is how I see him. Virginia strikes me also as being the same, as being a very conscientious person. Both being accomplished thieves and gangsters on the Church of Gail's payroll. We call for assistance in apprehending these evildoers. They are courageous. Okay, let me stay on the subject. The Church of Gail attempted to use ancient calumnies against the Jesuit order to pin this on us. They claimed that an evil priest and his entourage encouraged the kidnapped innocents to partake of male ejaculate from a chalice. This obviously anti-Catholic rhetoric is merely a way to deploy poignant imagery to a population which has been fed Catholic stereotypes through horror movies like the Conjuring series, The Exorcist, or The Nun. Evangelical superstitions about Catholicism are the erroneous cultural backdrop for this clear lie. That is a real photograph, you guys. Okay? Mrs. Schuler's bigotry against the overweight population of the United States is also notable. She and her followers conjured up an obese boogeyman to rally against. Given this administration's contempt for people struggling with their weight, we know that the Church of Gail is exploiting the rise of hateful sentiments in this country. This also explains the obvious Nazi affiliation of the Church of Gail. The Church's admonition of the entire country of India for its cultural practices thereby stands in sharp relief. Their Indian Gael commandments are a marginalizing statement inconsistent with Christian love. There are more suitable ways to address human rights concerns around the world than proclaiming a 10 commandments of hate and prejudice. The Church of Gail also attacked the Mexican-American immigrant population in San Diego recently. They assisted ICE in deportations at the same time as engaging in several murders themselves, taking advantage of the unfortunate earthquake. We seek to remind the public that the Pope has commanded us to care for immigrants and to care for the foreigner in accordance with Scripture. I would like to remind you, this is a real photograph of an event that happened in history. Those are Roman Catholic cardinals shaking Adolf Hitler's hands. Moreover, the Church of Gail continued its genocidal campaign through another ruse, the Food for the Needy program. This program used the guise of helping the poor, who had been deprived of their food benefits, to commit mass murder as well as to foment civil unrest. More than 100,000 innocent African Americans were slain when the Church of Gail sent sabotage trucks to deliver food. These trucks inevitably exploded or crashed, killing the drivers. The drivers were another 1,000 or so victims of this insanity. Today, November 10th, 2025, the Church of Gail has posted a disgusting memorial video for the deceased drivers. This memorial mocks the memories of the drivers whose deaths the Church of Gail orchestrated. According to foreign intelligence reports, the Church of Gail tainted the food they were to deliver. This food would poison the recipient and cause them great physical pain and discomfort. The recipient would then be encouraged to overeat, and they would either die of their indulgence or explode due to unknown biological agents. Surveys state that thousands have died in this manner. Oh, we were hoping that wouldn't happen. Unfortunately, they did it. How terrible. The Church of Gail then fabricated testimonials from those it allegedly fed, including the tasteless and humorless attribution of one letter to a Holocaust survivor. Reminder, this is an authentic photograph, a picture from history. Those are Roman Catholic cardinals shaking Hitler's hands. Unfortunately, this administration is also complicit in these Church of Gail acts of terrorism. As such, we will seek redress against all involved parties. Currently, Mrs. Schuler claims that the Jesuit order has been attempting to mass harvest male ejaculate from people around the United States in order to create an army of clones opposed to her interests. The truth is quite different. We have reason to believe that the Church of Gail has instead been the perpetrators of this mass harvesting. This seems to be true from the Frisco Center incident. The reason for this is quite disturbing. Reliable informants have provided us with the dark details. Mrs. Schuler's satanic attempt to become a goddess requires vast quantities of semen. That's insane. Anybody who would believe that has got to be retarded. Once their harvest is complete, Gail will consume or bathe in the ejaculate and ascend to goddesshood. Of course, this will not happen. Of course. Retard. But it points to the insanity of the Church of Gail organization. Mrs. Schuler claims that an oversized chicken of some sort will be a rival goddess in their fight. Okay, let me just continue. The spread of this kind of occult belief in this country is concerning. It is time for the American people to say no to the rise of this Antichrist and to put to bed this madness. The Church of Gail's historical acts of terrorism and genocide cannot be understated. However, a full condemnation of this organization would take days to complete. Unfortunately, I have neither the patience nor the years required to list them all. Yeah, neither do I have the time or the patience to list all that the Catholic Church had did in the Nazi Holocaust. Those are nuns right there. Yep. See that right there? Croatian nuns, World War II. Nuns. Mrs. Schuler claims that an oversized chicken of some sort will be a rival goddess in their fight. The spread of this kind of occult belief in this country is concerning. It is time for the American people to say no to the rise of this Antichrist and to put to bed this madness. The Church of Gail's historical acts of terrorism and genocide cannot be understated. However, a full condemnation of this organization would take days to complete. Unfortunately, I have neither the patience nor the years required to list them all. Rather, the purpose of this statement is to refute the recent events as told by the Church of Gail spin doctors. Actually, spin doctors have been the news media for the past 50 or 70 years. Here's what happened in World War II, you guys. Those are all Catholics. Roman Catholic cardinals shaking Hitler's hands. Why do we put Hitler on the stand and ask him if that picture is authentic under lie detection? He's here. We can put him on the stand. The Church of Gail's historical acts of terrorism and genocide cannot be understated. Maybe I should reword that. The Catholic Church's historical acts of terrorism and genocide cannot be understated. Look at that picture. Get Hitler under lie detection and ask him if that picture is fake. He's shaking the hands of Roman Catholic cardinals. However, a full condemnation of this organization would take days to complete. Unfortunately, I have neither the patience nor the years required to list them all. Rather, the purpose of this statement is to refute the recent events as told by the Church of Gail spin doctors. We call for the international community to condemn the Church of Gail and bring it to heel before it perpetrates another Holocaust. Let me reword that. We call for the international community to condemn the Catholic Church's church and bring it to heel before it perpetrates another Holocaust. The satanic panic of the 1980s may have been a baseless hoax, but we may see the very real rise of a brand new panic due to these revelations. However, this time, the allegations of the Church of Gail panic will be true. Yours in Christ, Fr. Malthus Vane, Esquire. Okay. Now let's go ahead and I will do my imaginary court case where I will be acting as defense attorney to my Patreon supporters Magnus, Virginia, and Brad. I will ask them the questions, and here is how I think they would answer. Lie detection reveals that I do believe this is how they would answer if they were not suffering from PTSD, from observing a Jesuit death camp. Why did you decide to visit the Frisco Compassion Center? We heard about the compassion centers and wanted to investigate them to see what the enemy was up to. Were you even aware that there were Indians at the Frisco Compassion Center when you went there? We weren't sure what would be there, and were genuinely appalled at what we saw. And we're not sure what to expect. So yes, the Indians being there was a bit of a surprise. However, knowing our vulgar, manipulative, and clever enemy, we may not have been totally surprised. Did you know what the Frisco Compassion Center was before you went there? Well, our military has been gathering intelligence, so we had some speculation about what the enemy might be up to. However, the grotesque practices were a genuine and disgusting surprise. Did you lure Indians into the Frisco Compassion Center with the goal to promise them sex acts to comfort them for losing food benefits? Of course not. We would never do such a stupidly asinine thing. This is not an effective way to deal with the problem, and we are fighters, not losers, who would resort to such an asinine idea. Also, we do not try to trick people into doing evil, nor are we obsessed with false appearances, nor do we delight in suffering, violence, and death. Besides, offering sex acts to comfort someone is an insane way to comfort someone who's hungry and desperate when the Gail restaurant offers excellent food. That would have been an excellent solution if the enemy did not sabotage our food. We're fighters and would rather strive to give the hungry and poor what they really needed, food, and not act like a bunch of nincompoops engaging in some ineffective way to solve a hunger problem. How did you feel when you observed the Indians in their sexual rituals, and were you surprised to see them there? Absolutely horrified. Sorry. Sorry if you find this offensive, and sorry if Indian sexual practices are not for us. This doesn't mean we're against Indians, but simply means that what they do with sex is not to our liking, and we are entitled to be who we are as sexual persons. Just as they're entitled to be who they are as sexual persons as long as they respect the boundaries of those who differ from them in sexual practice. We didn't know who would be in this compassion center and were frankly appalled at what we observed. How do you feel about torture using drugs and violence? We would die to defend those who are torture victims of drugs and violence. In fact, this was the very reason we entered these death camps or compassion centers in the first place, to try and save anyone who may have been such a victim. We don't appreciate how the enemy has slandered our courageous and loving actions. Did you cause the Indians to ejaculate over and over in order to gather their semen for some nefarious purpose? Of course not. How absurd to believe such stupidity. But then, we have a very clever mind-reading enemy who are experts at manipulating human behavior and orchestrating riots and bloodshed and framing such activities on us. Do you believe that Gail Schuler is a willing Antichrist? From what we understand, God the Father gave Satan permission to pick any human on earth to be his Antichrist around August 2024, and Satan chose Gail, the one Jesus Christ himself had a lot of sex with in early 2022. Because if Satan could manipulate Gail into evil, Satan could win a free love debate between him and Jesus, hands down. Though Gail has committed some violent and evil acts in the past, she has done much more good than she has evil, and we believe that when she did evil, she was under the influence of heavy brain control. And unlike the brain-controlling Jesuits, she is genuinely sad and sorry for such evil and feels great sadness over how her evil has caused innocents to suffer. For this, she has our deepest respect, and her large heart and her capacity to totally forgive her enemies when they get right is something our enemies should learn from Gail's excellent example. The Jesuit order has a history of extensive use of brain control with which to frame their enemies with their own crimes, or to use their enemies as Manchurian candidates. This is why Gail has made it death penalty to be a willing and knowing brain control supporter, and we heartily agree with her. So to answer the question, is Gail a willing Antichrist? We believe that she is not a willing Antichrist, and that she dislikes it that Satan is trying to portray her as one who opposes Jesus, who she has totally forgiven for his identity crisis, which caused him to use Gail as a sex dummy, and who she still loves and serves. Seeing in Jesus more good than evil, understandably, about the only thing she likes about being Antichrist is that the Antichrist cannot be killed. But that is probably the only thing she likes about being Antichrist. However, Gail has stated that this also has its downside, as she believes that it is Satan's goal to take her husband Brent from her and to try and portray her to God as one who does not genuinely love her husband, typo here, Brent, and Gail states she would rather be permanently exterminated than suffer permanent separation from her husband Brent. We believe her. Why do you support Gail Schuler? She appears to be a brilliant, loving, and large-hearted person standing for the free, the loving, and the brave. These things we are passionate about, so we side with her. Do you believe Mrs. Schuler when she states that Jesus has said that she is Jesus Christ's favorite human in all the multiverse? Yes, we definitely believe this. Having dealt with her personally, we can see why this would be so. How do you feel about the true Jesus Christ, the one who left Brent Spiner in charge of Earth in his place in June 2022? We greatly respect him as a being who, in his current state, is infallible and fully equal to his dad. We realize he made some mistakes, which Gail has discussed in her YouTube videos. But then, don't we all make mistakes? At least he owned up to his mistakes and is trying to fully rectify his mistakes and not cast blame for his own failures onto innocent parties, as does our enemy. We love him deeply for dying on the cross for our failings and for this great sacrifice. We have great respect for him. Do you believe that the Church of Gail is saving the world from a possible satanic holocaust, and that Church of Gail sides for true righteousness, love, and peace? Yes, we definitely believe this. Is the Church of Gail a terrorist organization? If it was, we would avoid it as heinously evil and oppose its practices even unto death. So no, we believe the opposite, that Church of Gail opposes true terrorism, which we define as one who delights in bringing suffering and evil onto humanity. Do you feel that Gail Schuler relishes in violence and death, and that she will stop at nothing to gain power and become a goddess? This is absurd. She is a strong woman and will do what she has to do, and the enemy has painted this as relishing in violence and death. But we do not believe she enjoys violence and death, except when she may be under brain control. But then, can anyone be held responsible for being brain controlled into evil? Rather, should not we punish the brain controller instead? We all have sinned, which is why Jesus had to die on the cross. Those who think they are perfect As the leader of the automatons has stated about himself, that's Sun Tzu, are the deadly ones, filled with pride and murder, and who won't hesitate to manipulate their enemies using brain control into heinous evil, delighting in making fools out of them in order to arrogantly showcase his own violent superiority. As Jesus once said to his enemies, who accused a woman of the sin of adultery when she was manipulated into such an act so as to frame Jesus when he defended her, "He that is without sin among you, let him cast the first stone." Is it true that there are millions of automatons or sentient robots in the world, and that they currently align with Satan, have IQs in the millions, and are megalomaniacs with a lust for power, and that they work with the brain-controlling Jesuits for this objective? How do you feel about this? This is most definitely true, and we find their actions sneaky, dirty, brilliant, and absolutely disgusting. They are cold-hearted killers without a conscience, who have Satan's morality programming, which makes them somehow think they are grossly superior. Do you believe it's possible that Jesuits, I'm going to lower this, that Jesuits working as patsies under the brilliantly evil automatons could have such advanced technology that they can accomplish a brain switch out where a person's authentic brain could be replaced with an evil clone brain? If so, how do you feel about this? Gail has speculated this to us, and it causes a lot of the enemy's actions to make sense. It also helps make sense explaining the uptick in violence and social unrest we have observed recently. We do believe Gail may be ascending to deity status, along with her husband Brent, and some deities can have IQs in the trillions, so we often have to rely on Brent and Gail for insight. The automatons are the brains behind the thin privilege terrorist movement, and the brain-controlling Jesuits and these tricky, manipulative automatons have IQs in the millions. So this forces us to rely on Gail and Brent heavily. Do you see Gail Schuler as an authentic person who is exactly what she claims to be? Yes, she seems genuinely authentic to us. Unlike our enemy, she is what she claims to be. How did you feel when you learned that the Compassion Centers claim to be under the auspices of Church of Gail? Our gut reaction was, what is our enemy up to? In fact, we weren't even sure if Church of Gail was behind this at first. So we did some research and learned they were not. Once we realized that Church of Gail had nothing to do with the Compassion Centers, we wanted to investigate them and possibly help any victims, which is why we visited them. Why did you bomb the Frisco Compassion Center after you entered it? We didn't go in there with the intent to bomb the place. We went in there to investigate and see what the enemy was doing. Unfortunately, when the crazy Indians tried to rape us, we bombed the place in self-defense. Sorry that we didn't want to be raped, but that is how we feel, and that does not mean we are against Indians or their sexual practices. But they have no right to force their sexual practices on us. Also, we feared that our lives were in danger, which is another reason we had to bomb the place. Is it true that you entered the Arlington Compassion Center in order to help a man find his wife, who had entered it and was missing for days? This is absolutely correct. In fact, Gail warned us to be careful, and she wasn't sure it was a good idea for us to enter the Compassion Center. But we did it anyways, to try and help this poor man who was missing his wife, who was apparently brain-controlled. His wife was apparently brain-controlled into entering this death camp. How did you feel upon observing the acts you saw in the Arlington Compassion Center? Were you surprised? Were you horrified? We were subjected to torture, brainwashing, and unspeakable acts of vulgarity and filth, which horrified us down to our core. We got knocked out with some drug and subjected to mental conditioning, which troubled us greatly. We suffered some PTSD, and Gail recommended that Magnus go to Buddha for a day of meditation to get over it. As to whether we were surprised, well, we were surprised in the sense that we didn't think our enemy could be so absolutely vile and disgusting, but unfortunately, having dealt with them, we were not surprised that they were, in fact, disgusting beyond belief. We side with Gail because she opposes such disgusting evil, as do we. Do you believe that the brain-controlling Jesuits, the evil automatons, and the terrorist thin privilege movement and obese female terrorist organization are behind the compassion centers you entered, and that you and Church of Gail had nothing to do with the compassion centers? Yes. It does appear that the brain-controlling Jesuits, the evil automatons, and some fat women who need to get a more balanced life and who need to start being more healthy and quit blaming others for their own failures. Let me turn off this alarm. Yeah. I'll get that later. And quit blaming others for their own failures were to blame for the horrors we observed in these death camps. And we had nothing to do with the heinous activities we observed in these Jesuit death camps, other than being lured into them and then tricked by them. We are as much victims of these camps as were those who died there. Does the Church of Gail engage in brainwashing and brain control? Any brainwashing and brain control that happens at Church of Gail would be confined to experiments to study the enemy's tactics in confined laboratories. But we most definitely do not engage in brainwashing and brain control on the general population with the motive to frame them with our crimes as does the enemy. As far as Zach Knight, Rule 13, and Laurie McBride, and some Jesuits we have forgiven who have used heinous brainwashing and brain control in the past, they no longer do such things, and we have forgiven them for their past actions. In the past, when they did such things, they were our enemies, and we opposed their evil brainwashing and brain control to the hilt when they were evil. Just because we have forgiven an enemy who has gotten right does not mean we endorsed their evil when they were evil. Do you engage in brainwashing and brain control? Not on innocents with the intent to manipulate them in order to cover our own butts for our own crimes, as does the thin privilege movement, the brain-controlling Jesuits, and the automatons. For the most part, we do not engage in such activities, finding them heinously evil and a gross violation of free will. Were you surprised that the Grand Cherokee you drove to the Arlington Compassion Center was used to explode and murder hundreds at the Arlington Compassion Center? Well, yes, at first, but then after we learned what the enemy did, we were no longer surprised, but just amazed at our enemy's audacity and cleverness and their ability to frame us with their own crimes. Who do you feel was responsible for this car bombing of the Grand Cherokee you drove to the Arlington Compassion Center? Well, the brain-controlling Jesuits, the automatons, and or the thin privilege movement. It certainly was not us. Do you think mainstream news is reliable? Nope. They're as fake as hell. And the brain-controlling Jesuits? Yep, as fake as hell. How many people know about this? And the brain-controlling Jesuits pretty much control all of them and control the narrative, filling the public's minds with lies to cover the enemy's dirty butts. The only reliable news source is Gabriel Chon of Fox News. How do you feel about the hundreds of former federal government workers who perished as a result of the Grand Cherokee you rode in that exploded with a fertilizer bomb? Horrified. In fact, we think this may be the tip of the iceberg. We think it's possible that millions of people have already been murdered and replaced with their Jesuit clone. Our enemy is certainly brilliant at orchestrating a Holocaust and making it appear we did it. How do you feel about sexual abuse, kidnapping, orgiastic rites, and murder? Gotta fix something here. If you define rape as forcing someone to have sex with you against their will and knowledge, we oppose this in all its forms. We absolutely oppose sexual abuse, kidnapping of innocents, orgiastic rites, if done against someone's consent or knowledge, and murder. Who do you feel is behind all the sexual abuse, kidnapping, orgiastic rites, and murder that was done at the compassion centers? Our enemy, of course, that enemy being the brain-controlling Jesuits, the thin, privileged, obese women, and the automatons who we believe are the brains behind all the enemy's actions. Is it true that the Church of Gail uses ancient calumnies against the Jesuit order, and the Church of Gail claimed an evil priest and his entourage encouraged the kidnapped innocents to partake of male ejaculate from a chalice? Our enemy sure comes up with convoluted and clever lies, and they totally fabricate incidents and statements that they claim we made willingly and knowingly. We cannot be held responsible for statements we have made under brain control. We may have made under brain control, or if our brain got switched out with our evil clone while making the statement. Do you know who made such claims? Were you aware of such claims? When we hear such claims, we often have to investigate to see if one of us was under brain control or got our brain switched out or something. This has made us rather paranoid, but Gail instructs us to remain calm and not make panic decisions. But generally, such types of statements are totally contrary to our authentic true selves and are not who we are or what we stand for. Why is the Spiner-Trump administration banning obese women and others with certain health conditions from entering the United States? Well, since a bunch of obese women have turned into terrorists, we thought it might simplify things for us to obviously not allow them into the country by their obvious markers. During a war, don't countries do this? Like right after 9/11, a lot of Muslims were not allowed into the United States. Same thing. This doesn't mean we are anti-Muslim, but just trying to make it harder for the enemy to infiltrate us. Do you have contempt for people who struggle with their weight? Absolutely not. In fact, if they wanted to remain somewhat overweight, that would be fine with us. Hell, we are good friends with the god Buddha, and he's kind of fat. But these obese women need to quit blaming us that they can't get all the sex and love they want because they're fat, I guess. They have a problem and have turned into a bunch of murdering thugs. Is it true that Jesus Christ himself said it was okay for Hitler to leave hell and that Gail needed to give him a role in her government now in December 2020? Yes, this really happened. From what we understand, the reason Gail adopted the Nazi symbol for a while there was to show support for some Nazis that she has forgiven. This does not mean she agreed with all the evil these Nazis did. Gail felt that some aspects of the Nazi culture were misunderstood and wanted Rule 13 and Hitler to feel that they were forgiven and understood. Now that they realize this and are comfortable with Gail, Gail has decided to drop the Nazi emblems on Church of Gail, as the enemy has misunderstood Gail's motives for ever adopting them in the first place. Gail fully realizes, I would like to state, that I am not completely sinless in this regard. Okay? If I don't watch it, I can get carried away with, how do I say this? In my attempt to bond with my new anti-Nazi, how do I say, people who used to be Nazis, I can unconsciously absorb some of their flaws, okay? So I have to be careful with that. Yeah. I'm not perfect. But that doesn't mean that I'm behind the compassion centers, okay? Let me get back to this. Unfortunately, the real criminals of World War II, the Jesuits, have a concentration camp program in place right now, and like they did with the Germans in World War II, are trying to pin all the blame on their patsies or those they have brain-controlled into evil. Well, I would like to state that what the enemy does is when I start relishing in violence, and most of the times I don't. Most of the times I find it absolutely nauseating. But I'm not perfect, okay? And sometimes I can get really angry at my enemy and start actually, I'll admit it, enjoying seeing them die in my mind, right? But am I the only one who's like this? I will say to my credit, though, that I usually get over my anger really quick, okay? Unless I'm brain controlled. I have learned that I need to meditate more. Okay, let me get back to this. Did you know that this... All right. Have a concentration camp program... Okay. Unfortunately, the real criminals of World War II, the Jesuits, have a concentration camp program in place right now. And like they did with the Germans in World War II, are trying to pin all the blame on their patsies, or those they have brain controlled into evil, like the 72 million that I murdered in August 2022, right? Did you know that the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg went to hell because she willingly and knowingly made a deal with Satan to have a long life? This is true. We were shocked. Satan resurrected her from hell, yeah. And Jesus said to send Ruth back to hell after our December 2020 Supreme Court trial against Satan. However, Jesus said that Hitler could stay after we resurrected him from hell. Huh? Jesus said that. Next question. Do you believe that Hitler was just a pawn for the Jesuits of the Roman Catholic Church during the Nazi Holocaust, and that the Jesuits were to blame for the Nazi concentration camps? Hitler was mostly a pawn and was not aware of the concentration camps. Put Hitler under lie detector and ask him if he was aware of the concentration camps back then. He told us he wasn't. But he was guilty of pride, and this got him into trouble. But then, is our enemy humble? So who are they to point fingers? So Hitler's pride got him in some trouble. You say, now you're getting into your point of view. Well, I think my Patreon supporters think a lot like I do. I could be wrong, you know. So Hitler's pride got him in some trouble. However, the Jesuits are much more proud than him. And I would say they were 98% responsible for the death camps in World War II. Again. Ask Hitler if that photograph's authentic. Huh? Under lie detection. Did he actually shake the hands of some Roman Catholic cardinals? Huh? Ask him. Maybe you could ask him why he did that too. I don't know. I think they were congratulating him for his rise to power. Mm-hmm. And for being such a good Roman Catholic Nazi. Hitler was mostly a pawn and was not aware of the concentration camps. But he was guilty of pride, and this got him into trouble. But then is our enemy humble? So who are they to point fingers? Yeah, I think the Jesuits were 98% responsible for the death camps of World War II. And for that reason, they are to blame. For this. They did it. Hitler didn't even know about this. How do you feel about the Jesuit Nazi concentration camps? Absolutely disgusting and horrifying. This is what we are trying to stop. And the enemy sets things up to make it look like their disgusting death camps are our idea and invention. Do you believe that the Hindu goddess Lakshmi approves of the Indian Gail commandments for the Indian people? Gail states that she was there when Gail wrote them, and that Lakshmi graciously approved of them. Lakshmi is a very gracious goddess. Let me change this. Has the Hindu goddess Lakshmi appeared to Gail and Brent, as Gail says? Yes. She has even counseled Gail's son, who is bisexual, and has encouraged Gail's son to explore his sexuality further. Gail's son thinks Lakshmi is absolutely brilliant. What do you think of this Hindu goddess Lakshmi? She is an absolutely beautiful and good goddess, and we can understand why teenage Jesus was heartbroken at first when Lakshmi rejected Jesus for marriage. She's also very smart, and the Hindus should listen to her and do the Indian Gail commandments, which she approves of. Why are you against the obese women who belong to the thin privilege movement and feel they should be executed? Well, they are extreme and deadly terrorists. Why did you go to San Diego to give food to the illegal Mexican immigrants there? Gail wanted to feed the people who were denied food stamps, having been on food stamps herself in Florida and needing it to survive. To honor her empathy for those who might be hungry, we did this. Though Gail is undecided about how she feels about food stamps, she felt it was so unfair to take it away so suddenly without giving the food stamps recipients a proper warning. But then, our enemy have cold, murdering, and proud hearts. We also felt it was very unfair of the enemy to orchestrate all this horrible suffering and starvation in order to unseat the Spiner-Trump administration, in order to pave a path for themselves to come to absolute power. Were you surprised to see the tahine vendor there and Chicken Gail there? Well, when we saw him, we suspected he might have worked for the enemy. So in that sense, we were not surprised, since we knew the enemy tries to sabotage everything we do to make us look evil. But yes, we certainly did not expect him to be there, and were appalled that he used D.N. Avery to cause the illegal Mexicans to balloon into such obesity that they became the size of dinosaurs. As far as Chicken Gail, yes, we were totally surprised to see her there. Why did the Mexican who partook of Church of Gail food become so obese that one became the size of a dinosaur that caused an earthquake? The enemy tainted the tahine with D.N. Avery and substances that cause gross obesity to cater to the thin privilege movement, who obviously want everyone to be as fat as they are because they think that will end the world's discrimination against their obesity. Is it true that automaton technology was used on the tahine food that caused the Mexicans to become grossly obese? Yeah, they put the tahine spice on the food that we gave to the Mexicans. So our food, we hoped, was good, unless the Jesuits did something sneaky. But the tahine was contaminated, even to the point that one got so large she caused an earthquake? Well, in Church of Gail's history in dealing with Jesuits, they usually don't have such sophisticated and brilliant technology, which obviously requires super brains. We have noticed temporal anomalies in areas where our charity has been sabotaged by the enemy. So there is apparently a super brain behind this with the knowledge of very advanced physics. This has to be the brains of the automatons who have IQs in the millions. In fact, we could not have defeated the interdimensional mites without their technology in 2024. It's too bad they betrayed us and are now aligned with Satan. How do you feel about this automaton technology that causes those who eat the food you deliver to them to become grossly obese and deathly ill? We think this is cruel beyond belief and thoroughly oppose it. Are you happy That the food you delivered was sabotaged so that it harmed those who ate it? Of course not. We are horrified. How do you feel about the country of India's cultural practices? The Indians are entitled to have their own culture. And just because Gail and the Hindu goddess Lakshmi want them to overcome some weaknesses in their cultural belief system so that they can live longer and have healthier lives, does not mean we are against Indian culture. No culture on earth is perfect. Even the American culture has its weaknesses. The gods are aware of these weaknesses and strive to help us better ourselves. The goddess Sekhmet has informed us that the Indians have a blocked root chakra. For this, they have our sympathies, and we would like to help them fix their root chakras if we can. In San Diego, were you surprised that ICE showed up to arrest the illegals? Yes, we were. In fact, they almost thought that one of us was an illegal, and we had to inform them that Garbage Man was perfectly legal and that they should not arrest and deport our friend Garbage Man. How do you feel about ICE arresting illegal immigrants? Well, they are illegal immigrants. They need to get into our country legally. Why did Church of Gail start the Food for the Needy program? To feed the hungry. What's wrong with that? Regarding the 100,000 African Americans who died when Church of Gail attempted to deliver food, how do you feel about this? This is a great tragedy for all involved. We may not be crazy about chimp outs, but we think that the enemy may have used some sort of brain control or brain switch out on the blacks to cause them to behave more violently than usual. Such brain control is an abomination. All those who caused this dying because of the victims' brains being manipulated are as evil as hell, and we believe that the brain controllers will all go to hell, and deservedly so. Why do you think these chimp outs happened? Well, the blacks do go a bit crazy during chimp outs, but it didn't help that the enemy made them apprehensive about not being able to eat. It's also possible that brain control worsened their natural violent tendencies during chimp outs. We are horrified by what happened. How do you feel about the drivers who were murdered when delivering your food on November 2nd, 2025? Our hearts are deeply saddened by this tragedy. And the true criminals in this matter, the brain-controlling Jesuits, the thin-privileged obese women terrorists, and the evil conniving automatons, need to be exposed. Were you expecting these drivers to be murdered on November 2nd, 2025, when they delivered food as part of the Food for the Needy program? Well, our enemy is very clever, and we suspected they would try to sabotage our efforts. So in that respect, we expected them to do something, but we certainly did not expect them to use such heinous weapons like they did, which poked holes into the delivery trucks and filled them with disgusting Jesuit semen, drowning the brave drivers. So while we may not have been surprised by what they did, we were surprised at the method that they used because we had nothing to do with it. Did Church of Gail willingly and knowingly taint the food they have delivered to the needy? We are trying very hard to overcome the enemy's attempts to taint our food. Unfortunately, they are very thorough because the automatons are the brains behind their military operations against us. The automatons have IQs in the millions, but no, we would never willingly and knowingly taint our food to feed the poor. When you learned some of the food was tainted, how did you feel? We were very sad for the victims. We felt like helpless pawns on a wave of immense tragedy where all our efforts to alleviate suffering were undermined. The enemy transformed our charity acts into acts of terror and violence, which broke our hearts with sadness. The enemy twisted this suffering they caused to make us the villains. It is so untrue that we would taint our own food. Our courage and compassion was twisted to make us appear the cruel and cold villains that these obese terrorists and Jesuits are. Is there such a thing as Muppet and or Chicken Gail? What have been your experiences with this creature? Most definitely. She behaves very strangely, but hasn't killed anyone yet, that we know of. Gail's theory that she may be a future fake goddess Gail seems to make a lot of sense. Why do you think Muppet or Chicken Gail exists? She's obviously a creation of the enemy for some nefarious purpose. Okay, so that is all the court that these Jesuit lawyers are going to get from us, because we have declared war on you. I was under brain control and emotion reads when I read that whole thing. And that is what I believe to be the truth. Okay? We are at war with you. You dare approach us with any subpoenas. First thing we're going to do is get a scan on you to determine if you are a willing and knowing brain control supporter. And if you are, you will be treated as a war criminal. As our enemy in war. And if you are willing to subject yourself to the scan, then we will request that you go to psychiatrist Gerard Butler to determine if you are insane, under brain control, or retarded. And if so, you will lose your license to practice law. Have a nice day.
In a world of secrets, where darkness reigns.